Chanukah Sameach, everybody. This week's Parshat is Mikeitz. Before I begin, I'd like to wish a hearty mazel tov to my daughter, Ricky, and Baruch Greenberg, who were married second night of Chanukah. Mazel tov to them. And we should all just enjoy smachot in our lives. Last week's Parshat, we left Yosef, where in the beginning of the Parsha, he was the favorite son, the Ben Zekunim of Yaakov Avinu. He was the heir apparent to Avram Avinu, and he had a very rapid decline facilitated by his brothers, where he became a slave and subsequently even a prisoner in jail in Mitzrayim, to the extent that even the Sar HaMashkim, who he had helped interpret his dreams and find his way back into the palace, totally forgets him the minute that he's out of prison, left to languish there for another couple of years. However, on this week's Parsha, the pendulum turns and his fortunes are reversed. Yosef rises from the dungeons of prison in Egypt to become the second most powerful man in the Egyptian empire. And it's Stavka, the sons of Yaakov, who had gotten rid of their nemesis in last week's Parsha, who are brought low to become potential prisoners and people suspected of treason in the land of Egypt. Now, the questions, there are many, many questions that one could raise on this story and Parshat Mikeitz. We're just going to deal with a few of them. The biggest question that everybody asks, I'm not asking it, it's not my question, is why didn't Yosef reveal his identity, reveal himself to his father when he became prime minister in Egypt? I mean, there's one thing that he never tried to contact his father, let him know that he was alive and well, maybe when he was an Eved by Potiphar, or when he was in prison, maybe he wasn't capable and he didn't have that option. But certainly when he became prime minister, the second in command in the entire country, to be able to send a servant in there or send a message to tell his father that he was alive and well, which is something that he should have done, because his father's been suffering for so many years, assuming that his favorite son is dead. Why didn't he have the sensitivity to do something like that? Question number one. And if for whatever reason we could come up with a good reason as why he didn't actively go out to try to pursue his father, when the brothers themselves show up at his doorpost in this week's Parsha, why didn't he at least reveal his identity to them? Why cause Yaakov Avinu additional tsar? It wasn't enough the tsar that he had by prisoning one of his sons, Shimon, and holding him hostage until Yaakov would be willing to send down Binyamin. Question number two. Question number three. While a simple pshat in the story might be that Yosef wanted to cause his brothers pain and to seek revenge on them for all the anguish that they had caused him, and that might be perhaps justifiable. Why in the world does he include Binyamin in this at the end of the Parsha, where he plants a golden goblet into the sack of Binyamin and accuses him of being a gadif and wants to put him in prison, and the other brothers can go home? Why cause his brother anguish? His brother was the one person who wasn't involved in the sale at all, never did anything to him. So why cause his pain? Last but not least, we'll call this question number four. The storyline in the text seems to be somewhat contradictory. While the simple pshat in this story is that Yosef is revengeful and he has this diabolical plan to cause pain to his brothers, cause pain to his father, possibly put them back into slavery forever. Yet at the same time, if you read through part of the story, you get a different idea. in several places in our story. For example, Mem Bey's Pasuk Chav Daled, most obvious. When Yosef first meets his brothers, Yisov Me'aleim Vayef. They talk about the fact they got into trouble maybe because they didn't listen to the screams of his brother. And then he turns away from them and he cries when he heard that. Why does he cry? He's not happy that the brothers are upset and worried. Wasn't that his plan? No, he cries as if he wished he had a choice to do it differently. That's doesn't seem to be the simple shot in the story. Also, in that same pasuk, Vayikach me'itam et Shimon v'yasor oto le'eineihem. He's already told them, again, the 10 of you have been accused of treason, of being spies against the Egyptian empire. So you know what I'm going to do? I want you to verify your story. I want you to go back and bring the brother you talked about, Benjamin. Even that would be magnanimous. But of the 10 brothers, maximum, you should allow one of them to go back and let the other 9 be in prison. Because if they really were spies and you let 9 of them go home, then 90% of their mission would have been successful. And they'll go back and give information about 90% of your territory. Why in the world would he allow 9 out of 10 suspected spies to go home without getting anything in return? And the pasuk even says, if you look at the language of the pasuk, Vayasor at the end, Vayikach me'itam et Shimon, he takes Shimon from them, Vayasor oto le'eineihem, and he put Shimon in prison before their eyes. And Rashi is very careful to say, Lo asu ela le'eineihem. He only had him in prison while the brothers were there and they could see that he was being put in prison. But Kevin Shiyatsu, but once they left, Hotzio va'achilo vashkeu, he took him out of prison, gave him food and drink, maybe put him under house arrest in a 5-star hotel in Egypt. Why did he take him out of prison? Right? Why is he being kind to Shimon? Also, in the introduction to this whole story, when the brothers first appear, Perek Mem Bey's Pasuk Tes, what does it say when Yosef first saw his brothers? Vayiskor Yosef eit hachalamot asher chalam lahem. He remembers the dreams that he dreamt about them. And then he goes on with his whole plan of accusing them of being spies. If this is a plot of revenge, is he only doing it because he wants to get back at them? Because he remembers the dreams? He should say, you know what, this plan, what was the motivation behind this plan? I remember that you threw me into a pit. I remember that you wanted to kill me. I remember at the end of the day, you sold me as a slave, and I spent years as a slave and a prisoner in Egypt. That's what I should remember. That's going to be the catalyst to cause me to come up with this diabolical plot to make your lives miserable. Instead, Pasuk says, I just remember the dreams. That doesn't make any sense. Now, there are several classical interpretations of trying to explain what Yosef is doing here. We're going to start with Rashi. And the same pasuk that we just started with, Perek Mem Bey's pasuk Tes. We left off at this pasuk. Vayizkor Yosef et hachalamot asher chalam lahem. Yosef remembered the dreams that he dreamt about them. So Rashi says, Asher chalam lahem aleihem, that he dreamt what has been lahem regarding them. V'yada sheniskaimu, and what do you mean he remembered the dreams? And he now realized that the dreams had come to fruition. Sharei hishtachabulo, because the brothers bowed down to him. So says Rashi, dream number 1 that Yosef dreamt in last week's Parsha of the being in the field and their sheaves would bow down to his sheaf, that first dream has been fulfilled. And therefore, why is that the catalyst for his plan? Because now he's got to create a plan so that dream number 2 will come to fruition, namely to bring the entire family down to Mitzrayim. Now, there would be a very simple reason to you want to get, you don't have to go through this whole rigmarole. Get Binyamin, go make sure Yaakov would send Binyamin. Who never knows if he would send Binyamin by himself? Maybe that's what Yosef felt. He'll never send him by himself. He'll come down along with him so that the entire family will come down. That will be the fulfillment of dream number 2. Why don't they just simply say, reveal yourself to the brothers. This is who I am. Bring Abba down. Which is exactly what happens when after Binyamin is brought down, right? It's just the brothers. He reveals himself, and the next thing you know is Yaakov and family coming down to Mitzrayim. So the question I have in Rashi, if in fact dream number 1 was fulfilled, I don't understand why he just simply didn't reveal himself at that point in time, and that will automatically bring to fulfillment of dream number 2 that the entire family will come down to be with him. And it's also interesting that Rashi never discusses the issue of the impropriety of Yosef's actions. What is he never brings up the question, was this moral and ethical, causing added pain to his father? Was it the right thing to do? Shouldn't he simply reveal himself right away and then have everybody come down? Rashi doesn't even deal with this question at all. The Ramban on the same pasuk, Mem Beis pasuk Tet, disagrees with Rashi, and he holds that the first dream it has not been fulfilled, even though the brothers have come and bowed down to Yosef now, but only 10 brothers have bowed down to Yosef. And if you remember the dream that he had in last week's Parsha, it was all 11 brothers that were going to come down and bow down to Yosef. So he says clearly, he doesn't look at it, well, not everything in the dream is exact. No, according to Ramban, at least in this dream, everything was exact. If it was only 10 brothers that bowed down, not 11, dream number 1 has not yet been fulfilled. I disagree with Rashi. And he, therefore, will not reveal himself to the brothers until the first dream has, in fact, been fulfilled. And therefore, he puts a plan in motion to make sure that in fact, will happen, that the first dream will be fulfilled, not a plan that the second dream will yet be fulfilled. And in fact, he adds on a point that had Rashi been correct, then the games that Yosef plays with the brothers of having bring down Binyamin and with the golden goblet and everything else that took place would be highly immoral and inappropriate for Yosef HaTzadik to do something like this. So here we have a situation where the Ramban clearly disagrees with Rashi. He then goes on to explain actually the story that happened with the goblet that Yosef hides into the sack of Binyamin. Why does he do that according to the Ramban? Because he's worried about sending Binyamin back alone with the brothers, right? And he therefore decides to determine their feelings towards him. Now, again, even that is somewhat difficult. And he, in a second, we'll see that he himself realizes that. In other words, we have the same question in Ramban. Okay, now you bring Binyamin, so now the first dream is fulfilled, all 11 brothers bow down. Okay, so immediately reveal himself to the brothers, let him go back and bring back Yaakov Avinu, so you get dream number 2 fulfilled. Says Ramban, no, he couldn't do that even then. Why not? Because he's worried that if he would send Binyamin back with them, that they'll try to do the same thing to Binyamin that they did to him. They'll kill him. They'll put him into a pit. They'll do something. He didn't trust them. They maybe trusted in bringing him to Mitzrayim, because if they didn't bring him to Mitzrayim, they couldn't get Shimon back. But now once they have Shimon back and they're alone, and Yaakov didn't know what happened in Mitzrayim, they can make up a story very easily that something happened to Binyamin, and that's what he's worried about. So he had to test the loyalty. He creates a situation where Binyamin is now going to be accused of being a thief, and the punishment being that he'll remain as a slave. Will the brothers risk their lives to stand up for Binyamin or not? If yes, then he can trust Binyamin going back with them. If not, I don't know what would not. Would he keep Binyamin as a slave, and that he and Binyamin will be reunited and stay together and send the other brothers back? What he'll do, we don't know. But that, according to Ramban, is why he comes up with the shtick with the goblet to test the loyalty of the brothers to Binyamin. Now, while these opinions, both Rashi and Ramban, may explain Pshat in the pasuk and answer why he does the plan that he does, and why he doesn't reveal himself immediately, neither one will provide satisfactory answers to all the questions or many of the basic questions that we raised. But they are the classical, Rashi and Ramban are the two classical approaches to the story. There is, however, a modern approach to the story as well. Yoel ben Nun, the most famous of those supporting this, was a theory by Yoel ben Nun, where he raises the question that we asked: why didn't Yosef, once he becomes prime minister, try to contact his father? And he claims was based on a logical mistake that Yosef had made. That Yosef wasn't sure whether it was just the brothers that wanted to get rid of him, or was it possible that after the second dream, where Yosef had claimed that his father and mother, the sun and the moon, were going to bow down as well as his brothers, then already it's possible that he felt that even Yaakov joined the group of anti-Yosef believers and joined the plan to get rid of Yosef. That will explain, remember, if you're looking at from the eyes of a 17-year-old boy who was the beloved son until that moment, why in the world would my father send me alone to Shechem to find out what's going on with the brothers? What do we need to do that? It's a long way off from Hebron. It's a dangerous area for Jewish people. He's worried about the safety and well-being of my brothers. There's at least 10 of them together. He's sending me by myself. Why doesn't he send an Evan to find, a servant to find out what's going on? Why is he sending me? Very, very, very fishy. Also, if the father's not involved, there wasn't one attempt that he knows about to search for Yosef. No pictures up, lost. There are pictures up of lost dogs and lost cats. There's no pictures up of lost, Yosef. His picture doesn't appear in any quart of milk bottle. And why not? So he basically thinks that the father is in on it. His father also wanted him separated from the family. The same thing that they did to Ishmael, and the same thing that they did to Esav is now being done to him. The only time that he realizes that he had been mistaken and that Yaakov was not part of the plan to sell him or to kill him, but rather he's been grieving every day of his life since Yosef has been brought down as a slave to Mitzrayim, then and only then does he reveal himself to the brothers. That's the pshat of Yoel ben Nun. Now, Rav Meidan has a lot of questions on this pshat. I didn't read the objections of Rav Meidan to this pshat. I just have my own. One major objection: is it possible to believe, even to Yosef, is it possible that Yosef could believe that Yaakov Avinu would be actively involved in such a plan? Doesn't make any sense. He was the beloved son. There's only one of two sons to his beloved Rachel. Would he simply, let him go to such a negative environment as being a slave in Egypt? The chance of his remaining Jewish, even if he remained alive, were basically, less than 1%. Would Yaakov risk that? I don't think so. Even if you want to compare it to the fact that Avram banish Ishmael. That was only after Ishmael acted very inappropriately. And even then, Avram didn't want to do it. It was only because Sarah felt it would be best for him to be separated, because he'd have it. And even then was only because of his negative influence on Yitzchak. If there'd be no fear of Yosef having negative influence on the other 10 brothers, there'd be no reason to get rid of him. And Avram only gets rid of him when God says to get rid of him. And Yishmael and Esav, Yitzchak never banished Esav, even when Yitzchak knew who Esav was, and he wasn't the person that he assumed that he was. He never banished. It was his son. Esav left voluntarily. He didn't want to be part of the Vua of Bris Ben Absarim. He left on his own. Went to his wife, to his in-laws' neighborhood. None of the Avos ever. They may not have, they put him up on the throne to be the heir apparent. And Yaakov could have said, "I disagree with you. I realize now that you're not the person. The brother's never going to accept you. You will not become the heir apparent, and then give it to Reuven, give it to Yehuda, give it to somebody else, and that's it." But to be involved in actively selling them down to Egypt doesn't make any sense. That's but that is my objection to Rabbi Yoel ben Nun's thing. But he has an interesting thing, beautiful insight. I have an issue with it. Rav Chanan Parat has an interesting take on why Yosef never revealed himself to his father, based on a Shai Agnon story. Where in the story there's a character by the name of Menashe Chaim, who was assumed to be dead, whether he was killed, whether an accident, but he's assumed to be dead. And he wasn't. Maybe he was in a hospital somewhere with amnesia. And in the meantime, his wife was permitted by the Bezdin to remarry. And he comes back secretly to his former town, and he finds out that his wife is happily remarried. And he makes a decision to remain silent, not to destroy the new life that his wife had been created. It would mean that maybe she was adulterer. I don't know, who knows, but he keeps quiet and sacrifices his own personal happiness in order not to destroy the new family life that his wife had created. And he wants to say that this could be true with Yosef. Why does Yosef decide not to contact his father? Because imagine how disruptive that would be within the family unity of Yaakov. If he were to find out that Yosef was alive, and subsequently to find out what happened to Yosef and who was involved in getting Yosef sold as a slave to Mitzrayim, the whole family would fall apart. Right? It would tear them. It tears his heart out. And therefore, according to Chanan Parat, the reason why Yosef never contacts his father is because he's concerned for the family unity. And he wanted, right, at least the other brothers, there's 11 brothers that were there and strong and supportive. Eventually, they'll get over the fact that he's not coming back. That was his pshat. And it could be to support this and maybe to add explanation. Maybe Yosef also realized his part in the whole story. And the fact that he never should have spoken Lashon Hara to his father, the fact that he rubbed it in with the dreams, he played a role in riling them up. And therefore, again, he didn't want to put any blame onto them. And what he decided to do was follow the behavior of his mother. His mother, on her wedding day, when it was told to her that she was going to be replaced by Leah, she didn't protest. She remained silent. She allowed Leah to stand underneath the chuppah, because she did not want to break or to embarrass her sister Leah. These two explanations, certainly if taken together, whether you hold like Rav Chanan Parat, whether you hold like Yoel ben Nun, will certainly answer up many of the questions that we raised. Certainly will answer the question why Yosef didn't get in touch with the family, and certainly if you take perhaps some of the elements of the modern approach, combine it with the elements of the classic approach of the Ramban and Rashi, most of the questions that we had will be answered. I would like to suggest, however, another possibility, going back to the classical pshat of the Ramban. Remember, according to the Ramban, he felt that the first dream had not been fulfilled when the brothers arrived for the first time by Yosef. He needed to send them back to get all 11 brothers to bow down to him. And then the only issue that the Ramban tries to figure out is, why doesn't he reveal himself then? Why does he go to this whole rigmarole, putting the goblet into Binyamin? What's going on there? So there are many Meforshim that believe that Yosef felt that the dreams that he had were not just simply dreams. It wasn't just a young child's, narcissistic ambitions to become a leader over his older brothers, had felt that he was better than everybody else, and that attitude was which would cause him at night to dream about things that he wanted to do in the future, but rather it was prophetic. And so to support this, maybe at the time he thought it was prophetic, but it really wasn't, and maybe he had second thoughts. But there were a lot of things that take place the day that Yosef was sold that would seem to support that this was a divine plan, and he was in the beginning of a divine plan. And first thing is that when he went to Shechem to see the brothers, they weren't there. He couldn't find them. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, some man comes and he happens to ask him, "Do you know where my brothers are?" And the man happened to know, "You know what? I heard them over saying they're going to a certain town, and this is where you are." What are the chances that he meet this man? Who was this man? Right? Was it Bashert? And then when he goes to the Shechem, and the brothers are there, and they decide to throw him into a pit. They're going to sell him. What do we know about the pit? We know that the Habor Reik Ein Bo Mayim. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. So again, we read this Rashi, I think last week. Mayim Ein Bo, Aval Chashim V'Akrabim Yesh Bo. There was no water, but there was something else in the pit: snakes and scorpions. Now, why is that important for us to know? And then again, the question: did the brothers know that there were snakes and scorpions in the pit? Last week, you mentioned that they did know. They'd realized a miracle happened to him and that he was something special more than they thought. They should have actually brought him home, not sold him as a slave. But there's another possibility: the brothers didn't know. In fact, that's a tie-in to Hanukkah. The pit was 20 amos deep. 20 amos, you can't see really what's going on. The only one who knew there were snakes and scorpions in the pit, therefore, would have been Yosef. Why is it important for Yosef to know that? Because he realizes that a miracle has been done for him. There was no humanly way possible for him to survive being there with all the snakes and scorpions. The only other person who survived such an ordeal was Harrison Ford in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, and that was a movie, not a reality situation. So why was that important? And even another coincidence that the Rashi puts out. We're told of the people that sold him into slaves, and there was an Ishmaeli caravan that brought him into Egypt. What was the caravan carrying on the way to Egypt? We're told about the spices who cares what that's a piece of trivia that's totally irrelevant to the story. A caravan, who cares what they were carrying? No, very important, because normally what they brought to Egypt was neft, was kerosene, a foul-smelling oil, and instead God made it that the one out of 50 caravans that are bringing spices, Dafka, that was the one that transported Yosef to Egypt, so that the tzaddik shouldn't have to have an unpleasant trip down to Egypt. I'm sure it wasn't pleasant being, kidnapped and tied up as a slave, but even whatever Kodesh Baruch Hu could do for him, he did for them to show him it was a miracle. That even though you are going through and living through one of the worst days of your life, extremely traumatic day for a 17-year-old to be sold as a slave by his brothers, but know that a HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there. So that if he didn't know that his dreams were prophetic when he said them, he certainly thinks or knows that the dreams are prophetic now. And if that's true, then if it's nevuah, there's a rule about nevuah. When a HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives a nevuah to a prophet, he's not supposed to keep it to himself. He's not allowed to keep it to himself. He has to go out and, if it's relevant to other people, he has to make it known to other people. And if there's an action required by the Navi, then that Navi is obligated not only to hear the dream and hear the prophecy, but to act on what the prophecy would want him to do. We see that, for example, even when Yosef interprets the dreams of Paro in this week's Parshat. He doesn't just stop and say 7 good years, 7 bad years. He gives Paro a directive. You have to do something. That's what the prophecy is all about. You have to hire somebody to put into a plan to save food during the 7 years of plenty so that there'll be food during the 7 years of famine. So that's exactly, Yosef feels that the dreams are prophetic. And if dream number 1, there was a reason. Why did dream number 1 talk about 11 brothers bowing down to me when only 10 of them showed up? So according to Ramban, the dream wasn't fulfilled. But then he has to ask himself, why not? Who would ever think that Yaakov would be silly enough to send Binyamin along with the other 10 brothers, alone? That he only makes that mistake once, not twice. So then Yosef realizes, so why in the world in my dream did God have 11 brothers appear to me? There's a reason. Binyamin has to be there. Now, I don't know if the dream told him what that reason was. This was something that Yosef figured out on his own. If 10 brothers coming along is not good enough, I need Binyamin. Binyamin plays a crucial role. What is that crucial role? So I think that this is the Abarbanel and the Kliyakar mentioned this idea, and I think it's 100% correct, that Yosef realizes that Binyamin has to be there. He plays a critical role. That what is Yosef supposed to do? What's the message of the dream? I want you not only to reveal yourself and get your father to come down. I want you to create a plan that will allow your brothers to accomplish Shuvah Gemura. Right? The brothers talk about the fact that they should have been gone to Fnei Rosh Sadin when his brother was screaming, and they should have a little bit more compassion, even though he was a rotten, good-for-nothing kid who deserved what we did to him. But maybe we should have gone to Fnei Rosh Sadin beyond the letter of the law. Maybe. But that's not enough. The Stamson Referral Hirsch says that the job of Yosef was to try and create a new relationship between himself and the brothers. If he would simply reveal himself the moment that the brothers came, their past would have haunted them forever. Right? The brothers must provide to Yosef, right? Must prove to Yosef and to themselves that they have changed. The only way that's going to happen if Yosef recreates the exact same scenario that happened with him. The brothers are alone with Binyamin. In fact, he's even going to make it easy for them. I'm going to accuse Binyamin is going to be caught as being a slave, even though being a Ganav, and even though he's not a Ganav because money was returned to your sacks as well, and you know that you didn't steal anything. The ruler of Egypt wants to make him a slave. They could have walked out of there and said, go back to the father and said, look, check it up in the news. This is what happened. Binyamin stole the goblet. And because of that, he's now a slave. We did everything we could to try to convince the king otherwise. And that's what happened. This time the brothers don't do it. They accomplish a tshuva gemura, which will cause a little bit of the healing of this family to be able to come together. I think that's a critical point that we can add on to the Pshat of the Ramban, that the reason why Yosef why Binyamin had to be back and why the first dream wasn't fulfilled, that he had to use Binyamin to recreate the scenario that happened with him. Binyamin is now the only other son of Rachel alive. Will the brothers defend him, or will they once again walk away from him and allow him to remain in Egypt? That was critical. One more consideration that I read in the Sefer by Rav Tzvi, Karatavsky Zichron Lebracha, where he goes back to say not only does Yosef remember his own personal dreams, he remembers the dream that was given to his great-grandfather, Avraham Avinu, at the Bris Bein Hapsarim, where this was something that all the brothers were aware of. It was a tradition within the family to know that they were going to go down into exile, a very difficult exile for 400 years, and afterwards, God Kadosh Baruch Hu would redeem them for Rechush Gadol, and they would all go back to Eretz Yisrael to become Klal Yisrael. In fact, that's why when Yosef is about to die, he makes a point in asking brothers, I know Paro was never going to let my body leave the territorial boundaries of Mitzrayim, but when HaKadosh Baruch Hu will ultimately redeem you after you've gone through Shibud, I want you to remember me and take my body back there as well. So Yosef sees that there's a divine directive to bring Yaakov down to Mitzrayim. The time is now right that Yaakov is supposed to come into Galus. But there are many ways that Yaakov could be brought into Galus. I mean, one of the questions that may have surprised Yosef is the fact, well, not if you hold this pshat right with the tshuva, but certainly according to Ramban, and certainly according to Rashi, that again, according to the Ramban, the first dream didn't come true. He had to make just the first dream come true, that he'd be pretty sure that only Binyamin would come. According to Rashi, the first dream came true, 10, 11, what's the big deal? Now he's going to bring everybody, right? The question would be, would Yaakov, in fact, allow Binyamin to go down? In fact, Yaakov didn't even want the brothers themselves to go down. And even knowing that Yosef is there, he had to be convinced to go down to Mitzrayim, because he didn't want to start Galus. He knew that going down to Mitzrayim would make life miserable for his children and grandchildren. He tried every excuse not to let it happen. And it therefore would be possible that maybe the only way that Yaakov would himself be brought down to Egypt, if he wasn't willing to go voluntarily, would be to put him in chains and to forcibly bring him down to Egypt. God did not want that to happen. Yosef did not want to happen. And therefore, he considers it part of a continuation of the dream given to Avraham Avinu of the Bris Bein Hapsarim, that he had to play a part in getting Yaakov down in a dignified way, to come down as the father of the prime minister of Egypt, to come down in a chariot that was sent by Paro himself, rather than to be dragged, kicking, and screaming in chains. Possibility. Also, possible that Rav Kanataski mentions that the shibud had to be done in stages. A lot of times when bad news about to come, you try to break it to a person in stages, not pour on the worst possibility all at once. Stage number one would be you come down, you're right, his father and brothers will bow down to him, but at least as a relative, he's bowed down to an equal, to a brother. And then stage number two, they'll bow down to Paro. Paro, who was who was a good guy, who was a benevolent monarch, you could say. So that, okay, I'm willing, he's a guy who's going to give them, tax breaks and give them housing and give them jobs and provide food for them. Okay, he deserves to be bowed down to. Stage number two, he's not a relative, but at least he's a goy tzedek. And stage number three, when you have to bow down to the wicked Paro, right? And therefore, another motivation would be to cause create a scenario where Yaakov is going to have to come down, and the shibud would begin stages to make it easier on them. So that would be my approach to that. The idea of using the Ramban to try to explain why Yosef does what he does in this week's Parsha, with bringing Binyamin and playing the trick that he plays on them, was not only to bring a tshuva gemura to the brothers, because that would be the only way that the family would not be torn apart. And it's interesting, the Torah never really tells us what happened when Yaakov found out that Yosef was still alive. Did he ever really know how Yosef got into Egypt, whether the brothers had hand in that? We don't know. You can do whatever speculation you want. Yosef was successful in his plan, at least from it seems within the Torah, of not breaking apart not breaking apart family and having everybody come down to Egypt and begin the Shibud Mitzrayim in the most honorable way that could be possible under the circumstances. Now, what modern day lessons can we learn from the story? I'm sure that there are a lot of them. There's only one that I want to emphasize right now. We know that according to the way we've explained it, Yosef tried to repair a rift caused by traumatic and painful actions that the brothers did to him. What they wanted to kill him, to put him into unbelievable, horrible circumstances as a slave in Egypt. We, the Jewish people, have also been put through, on a national level, horrific experiences over the years by the Gentile world, whether it was be as slaves or at times actually killing us. I would say murdering us, almost to the extent where they wanted to wipe out the entire Jewish people. And any time we today will bring up how we were treated, during the Holocaust, they'll always say that we're paranoid. We always go back to that. We always remember that. Why do you get over it? That happened, 80 years ago, right? Go. The truth of the matter is that we're not paranoid. Well, we see how if we wanted to trust the nations of the world, we'd have to know that they learned the lesson of the Holocaust. You see, read the headlines in today's papers. Doesn't look like the world learned anything from what happened between 1940 and 1945. Certainly in Europe, there's a high rise in the incidence of anti-Semitism. Even the United States of America, an unbelievable rise in anti-Semitic statements by major personalities, and even someone read to me in this week's paper about the Post, but even actions of the American government equating our extreme behavior to the behavior of our enemies, the Arabs, and that we both have to refrain from such activities, and we're treated no different than a terrorist. Has the rest of the world learned their lesson from what they've done for us in the past? Absolutely not. So then how in the world can we trust them, right? And to do what is right for us. In order for us to be able to do that, there must be a fundamental change in the relationship between us and the Gentile world, which doesn't seem to be the case. We are not necessarily being paranoid, but we are realistic. We've lost too much. We have too much at stake to be able to rely on the well intentions of a world that hasn't really carried through. They didn't accomplish a tshuva gemura the way Yosef wanted to do to the brothers. Halavai, that should happen. Chanukah Sameach l'kulam, and thank you so much for listening.